Celebrities and pop culture icons are everywhere we go. They are at the forefront of entertainment, coming from so many different avenues, whether it's music, sports, cinema, or even obstacle course game shows. I'm sure when growing up, you had a favorite celebrity, or at least maybe a couple of them. When I was a kid, I was obsessed with Tony Hawk. I'd play Tony Hawk on my PS2, the greatest console ever by the way. And while I never really got into skateboarding myself, I absolutely love watching it, and I mean, Tony Hawk is the man. He's just, not even when it comes to famous people, he just is one of the best people of all time, and definitely one of the coolest. I mean, seriously, who's cooler than Tony Hawk? But okay, you must be wondering, Noah, why are you even talking about Tony Hawk on your channel? Well, that is a great question. Remember how earlier I said that celebrities and pop culture icons are effectively everywhere and we can't really escape them? Social media posts, the news, giant billboards, completely random advertisements that have literally nothing to do with anything they've ever done in their entire careers. Oh yeah, and obstacle course game shows. And no, I'm not talking about John Cena on the reboot of Wipeout. I'm talking about Tony Hawk and Terry Takitis on a special episode of MXC. Now, I probably have to answer some other important questions such as, what even is MXC? Well, I can definitely tell you that it isn't some stupid cryptocurrency that always floods my feed when I try searching up MXC on Twitter. But you know, I feel like every video about MXC that's out there on YouTube has to spend some time actually explaining what MXC is, just because of how niche of a show it seems to be nowadays in the 2020s, so I might as well just follow suit with that. To explain MXC, I have to explain what Takeshi's Castle is. Takeshi's Castle was a Japanese game show in the mid to late 80s that featured a variety of different games that everyday citizens would partake in. There'd be over 100 people in each episode, and the purpose of the game show was to complete these games to get to the final game, which was an all-out showdown with Count Takeshi, the owner of this castle. Takeshi Kitano is a very famous Japanese actor, and with the help of his goons, the Emerald Guards, they'd fight off the remaining contestants who managed to make it all the way through. Now that you have the most basic understanding of what Takeshi's Castle is, I now want you to just completely forget about everything I just told you, because that is not what MXC is. MXC is basically the American dubbed version of Takeshi's Castle, but not in a completely accurate way in the way you may think of what dubbing is. Typically, a dub is just the exact same thing but in a different language, such as any kind of anime, but this dub of Takeshi's Castle doesn't follow the actual format of the show, and MXC is its own show. It simply just uses the footage and characters from Takeshi's Castle. The format for MXC is that two teams who likely have nothing to do with each other but are feuding, compete in 4 to 5 games, and in the end, the team with the most people who completed these games wins the episode. And I'm serious about these teams because you'll get just random stuff like wedding industry versus trucking industry, or mall workers versus telephone companies. Also, some other important things to note in MXC are the additions of the impact replay, which goes to one specific moment from each game in the episode that brings out the most amusement. And then there's Kenny Blankenship's top 10 most painful eliminations of the day, which is a very fast-paced, almost rhythmic and chaotic montage of what Kenny Blankenship has deemed the 10 best moments from this episode. Okay, but wait, who is Kenny Blankenship? Oh yeah, I should probably get to explaining that as well. The hosts of MXC are Kenny Blankenship and Vic Romano, at least that's what their names are in MXC's American dub. Vic is the straight man who tries to keep things, and specifically Kenny, in order while also being pretty self-deprecating, while Kenny is the dumb and funny host who only cares about things typical dudes care about: women, beers, parties, you get it. Then there's Guy Ledouche, the French sideline reporter that is extremely perverted and will try to get on with literally anything that moves. And then there's Captain Tennille, who in the original Takeshi's Castle is the one guiding all of the contestants to topple Takeshi in his castle, but in MXC, he's a bit of a right-wing nut who loves to ask the contestants questions that they will always answer incorrectly according to him. It's great stuff, trust me. Great stuff that probably wouldn't fly today, but that's also what makes MXC so great and so beloved, even to this day. MXC isn't just about the games and the fails like Takeshi's Castle is, because MXC is riddled with layered jokes that have double, triple, even quadruple entendres that will need at least a few watch-throughs to really catch it all. But yeah, MXC ran for 5 seasons, and let me tell you, these 5 seasons of hilarious dubbing of Takeshi's Castle are gold. But wait, how does this even tie back to Tony Hawk? Remember, all of MXC's episodes are dubbed over the original Takeshi's Castle footage, except for one. The premiere of Season 3 titled MXC Almost Live Greeks vs. Geeks. For the first and only time, MXC were making an episode that didn't feature footage from Takeshi's Castle, at least from the games and competitions, and instead filmed their own version in America. This was in 2004 as well, and the show had spread across the nation like wildfire, and it was time for something truly special for the show. In an article for the New York Times, multiple college students, namely from the University of Dayton, talked about their experiences with watching MXC in college with their friends and roommates. Executive producer of the show, Paula Beta, also mentioned how popular MXC was across college campuses and even poked fun at the fact that they were definitely responsible for a lot of the alcoholism across US colleges due to the hilarious MXC drinking games taking place. It's 2004, Spike TV is becoming more and more popular as a network on television, and I mean, this is just prime frat boy times. And this is exactly what led to this special episode of MXC where all of the contestants were college students. Around 150 Floridian college students were recruited to participate in the almost live special that took place at Universal Studios in Orlando. Only 4 games were recreated for this game, those being Wall Bangers, Singers and Floaters, Window Pane, and Log Drop. This was all truly monumental for the show and for Spike for what it was doing for this show, so let's get into the actual episode and what happens in it. So, this episode does still use footage from Takeshi's Castle, but only to showcase the 4 main recurring characters, Kenny Blankenship, Vic Romano, Guy Ledouche, and Captain Tennille. Funnily enough, the whole introductory segment with Captain Tennille splices together clips from the original Takeshi's Castle and the actual filming from Orlando, but that's the extent of original footage that is shown in this special. The sideline reporter that appears live is Guy Ledouche, played by Eric Esteban, and Major Babe appears live as the Captain Tennille replacement, played by Michelle Sorel. And of course, the other 2 major figures in this were one of the greatest skateboarders of all time, Tony Hawk, and champion snowboarder Tara Dekitis. Her Wikipedia page isn't as big as Tony's, but at least she can say her claim to fame is being on MXC. Same with Tony Hawk. Now, why exactly were 2 X Games athletes and champions on the first and only American filmed episode of MXC as the main team captains? Well, I actually reached out to Tony Hawk for an answer and, well, I got ignored. Definitely doesn't have to do with the fact that he has almost 9 million followers and will never ever see this message, but nonetheless, who knows why he and Tara showed up for this. But as said before, this was in 2004 on Spike TV on a rapidly growing show and network, and for Spike TV, they probably wanted some cool and badass people to be featured, and I definitely think skateboarding and snowboarding were the right places to look for this. The show also makes sure that Tony Hawk and Tara Dekitis have their own kind of content throughout the episode and that they aren't just there to just be there. They even have a little bit of back and forth with Kenny and Vic, but they seem to be genuinely interested in the events taking place. There's multiple times where Tony Hawk is giving a pep talk to his team, and I love the way he explains the games as well, like this.
Stay on the floaters, and if you get a sinker, you're in the toilet. Floaters!
I mean, he basically just described the entire joke behind the name of Singers and Floaters, which I find hilarious. But there's also this where he describes what wall bangers is.
Some closed doors, but you're just gonna have to break through them. Yeah! So let's do it.
And what's funny about this is that what he just told them to do is actually what ended up happening with a couple of the contestants. Tony Hawk was a legend of foreshadowing for these moments in wall bangers, but this moment right here was also the debut of the new music for the MXC Impact replay, and I swear this is such a goddamn banger. Just listen.
Look quick, if you play it backwards, you can hear a satanic message. Watch Spike TV.
I also like the cuts to Tara and Tony's faces whenever a member of their respective teams fails or completes a game, just to remind us of this heated rivalry between the Greeks and geeks. Oh yeah, the teams. I mean, that's all pretty self-explanatory, right? Just take it from Tony and Tara here.
The geeks have been laughed at, scoffed at, wedgied, ridiculed, trash canned. I speak from experience. Today, the geeks rise up and fight back. Be warned, Greek.
My Greeks may not get the best grades, but they know how to party and win. So geeks, don't break your pocket protectors.
And if you couldn't tell, Tony and Tara are the only people in this entire episode to not be dubbed either. I mean, that makes sense, but what's funny is that even all of the American college students who are speaking and shouting in English are also dubbed over by the MXC voice cast to keep the same identity that every other MXC episode has. It just adds to the ridiculousness of this whole thing, and what's even funnier is they poke fun at it too.
Ooh, Tara gives her Doesn't matter what I say, you're going to overdub my voice.
Where was that? Overdub what?
Yes.
What does that mean?
I don't know. Should have overdubbed his run.
Right, you are, Ken. Let's take it.
It's exactly why MXC was so good, because they can make fun of and poke fun at literally every and anything. Another feature of this Almost Alive special to really make it feel special was what I'd call a halftime performance basically, and it was a whole several minute performance by P. Lander Z in the middle of the episode. If that just doesn't scream mid-2000s for you. They're an interesting choice of band for this, but I'm guessing it's because they're a Japanese-American band, which would fit that kind of thing with Takeshi's Castle and MXC, and they're also a bit more of a niche band. Still, it's like totally random for this kind of thing to happen in MXC, and I'm not really sure why this was included, but I think it's all worth it for Kenny to scream out that this is the most famous rock and roll band in the world. Definitely a true statement right there. And to top it all off, this all comes back full circle to Tony Hawk and Pterodactytus. The score ended as a 7-7 draw by the end, but this is MXC, and there must be a deciding factor. So Tony and Tara ended up actually partaking in log drop themselves to score for their teams. And can you believe what happens? Tony Hawk, in his sunglasses, completes the whole thing. But then, wait a second, Pterodactytus also completed the whole thing. So the episode ended in an 8-8 draw, but I'd personally give the win here to Tony Hawk and the Geeks just because he completed the whole thing with his sunglasses still on, and that right there is what I'd call aura. So, with an 8-8 draw, the two team captains actually teased at a potential rematch needing to happen at some point, although we sadly never got that. How could we have not gotten another Almost Live special? I mean, this was great. Well, on the Keshi Heads forum, a user named Jose Chung, or otherwise known as the JM Archives, conducted several interviews with many different members of the MXC team, from writers to producers, and some of them briefly touched on the topic of the Almost Live episode of the show. Those being John Cervenka, a writer, as well as the voice of Captain Tennille and Guy Ledouche, Christopher Darga, writer, as well as the voice of Kenny Blankenship, and Victor Wilson, writer, as well as the voice of Rick Romano. R.I.P. Victor Wilson, by the way. All three of them touched on the fact that they would have loved to continue doing a live version of MXC, especially with the success of shows such as Wipeout and American Ninja Warrior that came years later. However, it was ultimately the network Spike TV that wasn't really interested in doing this, and as Victor Wilson stated, it was something elegant with just using the older footage, and I think that's also a good point. There have been hundreds of recreations of Takeshi's Castle, and even the great recreations don't really match the true feeling and look that the original had, but it's also very fair to consider the success of such obstacle course game shows in America that came after MXC. And I loved Wipeout, but, well, the original version of it, not the new one with John Cena. That one kinda sucks, sorry. And I used to enjoy American Ninja Warrior, but it just pales in comparison to its original Japanese counterpart, and I haven't watched it in who knows how many years at this point. But of course, the key component to MXC is its commentary, and I think it could have been a huge success if they kept doing the Almost Live format, but I guess we'll never really know. But there have actually been a couple attempts at doing Takeshi's Castle in America. But you'll have to wait for another video specifically about those, so stay tuned for that. At the end of the day, MXC is one of the greatest shows of all time, and I have always stood on that opinion for my entire life. This Almost Live episode is truly one of a kind, from the splicing together of both versions of the show, the dubbing over of American college students, a crazy halftime performance, and appearances of X Games champions Tony Hawk and Pterodactytus. Believe me, Tony Hawk is a legend, and while he's achieved a lot in his career, I think being a part of MXC is definitely the highlight of everything he's accomplished. Thank you guys for watching this video. If you made it to the end, you're also a legend just like Tony Hawk. Comment down below if you're a fan of MXC or Takeshi's Castle, and also comment down what else you'd like to see me talk about on this channel. Like the video, subscribe for more videos, and yeah, thank you for watching.